If you've ever watched Star Trek Voyager, you've seen the character Chakotay, the ship's Native American first officer. What you probably don't know is that the person who was hired to make sure that the character was authentic was never Native American at all. And by the time anyone could stop him, it was too late. Today, we're going to look at the man behind one of the craziest long con identity frauds in American literary history. If you're new here, I do mini deep dives on insane fake memoirs, delusional authors, publishing controversies. I post a new video every Sunday, so if you like this, I have a bunch of videos just like it. And this one's a big one. This one's a doozy. I feel like just because the length of time that this fraud continued is insane. So who are we talking about today? Well, we are diving into the story of Jamake Highwater. Jamake Highwater, whose real name was Jackie Marks, was a celebrated author of 30 books, a Newbery Honor winner, a PBS Documentary host, and a Ford Foundation grant recipient, who told everyone that he was a Native American, but he was just a white guy.
You've been on a crusade for some time now to make Indian art more visible and more accessible.
That's true.
How do you propose to do that, and with what success have you met?
Well, I mean, I'm doing it in the only way that I know how, by writing about it, since I'm a writer, and who's Indian, but my books, you know, have done well, and they've been picked up by what's nicest to me is that they're used by Native American studies programs in universities across the country. There are almost 100 universities that now have Native American studies programs. I always tell the story that in the Southwest, people always say to an Indian, gee, what tribe are you from? And in California, people always say, gee, you're an Indian, aren't you? And in New York, people always say, you're not an Indian, are you? And
what does that mean?
That means that
regional differences in taste?
I think regionally, we simply are invisible in New York City. I think many New Yorkers sort of think that an Indian almost has to be a put-on, that we're a terminal people, that after all, we don't exist anymore, or we exist somewhere on the roadside.
Maybe there's a more positive aspect of that New Yorkers think that there is a place for everyone in New York.
Well, I think that's more generous than I would be about it. I really think, in talking with other Native Americans about this, that we really don't have visibility in this city, which is the capital of media, and that concerns me.
He acted very charming, and he was a very good con man. People were obsessed with him. They fell in love with him, and they believed him for decades. So how did this all happen? I just want to say, for the rest of this video, I'm not going to call him by his made-up name. Let's call him Jackie, his real name. According to Jackie, he was born in 1930-ish in Montana and grew up in Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley. We just talked about somebody who grew up in the San Fernando Valley, or this one, whatever here. He told everybody that he didn't know the exact year he was born because he was adopted, and he just didn't have access to the exact date. Later, you know, people would find his birth certificate, and we would have the date, so we'll talk about that soon. He said he was adopted by a couple named Marcia and Alexander Marks. Hold on to that, we'll come back to that later. He attended college in Los Angeles, where he became interested in modern dance and choreography and started writing a ton during this time. He ended up forming his own dance company and started calling himself J. Marks. Around this time, he spent working at the dance company for 12 years. He also wrote for dance magazines. In 1967, he moved to New York, and he ended up meeting with an executive at Bantam Books over a proposal for him to write a book on contemporary rock music. Rock, in other four-letter words, was published in 1968 with photographs by Linda Eastman. Yes, the Linda, who would marry Paul McCartney the next year in 1969. This was the book that kicked off his writing journey. This is the last one that he published specifically in his own name, his real name. In 1970, he visited a Pueblo Indian historical site, and things started to shift. He wrote a lot of other articles, music reviews, and then published another book called Mick Jagger, the Singer, Not the Song in 1973. Now, this specific Mick Jagger book, this may be the first time he uses the name Jamake Highwater. Then, shortly after, in 1974, a year after he wrote the book and adopted this new name, he claimed to have received an affidavit by his adopted mother that led him to believe that either one or both, which is just a really weird way of putting it, one or both of his biological parents were Native American, and his birth name had been Jamake Highwater. Now, I did a lot of research, and I'll put some links below, but the years that I found just weren't matching up in the research, and things didn't quite make sense. But it was somewhere around this time where he kind of told everybody, hey, I'm Jamake. That's what I'm supposed to be. That's what I was born as, whatever. So the ruse starts around this point. In 1975, he publishes Fodor's Indian America, where he completely drops the J. Marks name and opts for Jamake Highwater. At this point, we are fully into the ruse, and he's going just by Jamake. He's trying to kind of erase the name J. Marks, basically. In the 1970s and 80s, he continues to publish book after book as Jamake. Nonfiction, fiction novels, you name it. He just put out a ton of work around this time, a lot of it having to do with Native American stories and art and folklore, lots of things like that. He's presenting himself as such an expert that PBS asked him to host in the 80s, where he hosted a program based on his book, The Primal Mind.
Most people believe that our ancestors began in a place very much like this, and that some of us moved on to highly sophisticated societies, while others apparently didn't evolve very much at all from this ancestral cave. Of course, today we know better. We've all evolved into the 20th century. We've simply taken different directions with different objectives and goals. This program is about some of the alternative ways of attaining civilization. Different myths, different truths, even different realities. The cultural riches that flow from the primal mind.
He was the definitive, this person who's pretending to be Native American, and we'll get into all the details. He was pretending to be Native American, but at the time in the 80s, he was seen as the definitive expert on Native American everything. So I found a lot of information from the archives of the New York Public Library. I'll link that below. It gave me a rough timeline, and then watching interviews, I plugged in some more detail. So he didn't just make up the name Jamake Highwater, he built an entire ecosystem of a life that didn't exist, and people believed the heck out of this guy. And so let's talk about how exactly he built this kind of credibility for himself. So over the course of years, he slowly built up some sort of weird credibility that people just completely bought into. He did a lot of things to establish this credibility. One of the big things he did was that he weaseled his way into Native American groups. So he annoyed the heck out of some Native contacts that he had met until he got an invitation to join the White Buffalo Council. Then he put that he was a member of the council in his book bio. This gave him a decent amount of credibility that he would continue to ride on for the next decade or so. He basically pestered his Native American friends and everybody until he got to write for Native publications, official Native American publications. Akwesasne Notes even published him because he was just pestering endlessly. And we'll get back to Akwesasne, and I hope I'm saying that right. So he literally shoved himself into activist circles, left and right, doing everything he could. Then once he would weasel his way in one organization, he would put that in his book bio, and then he would keep stacking these up. So eventually he would get Newbery Honors academic speaking gigs, federal arts grants, all of these things, based on credibility that he had literally invented. Meanwhile, real Native authors couldn't get those same publishing deals, grants, or PBS slots. He was taking this space, and he was seen as the definitive source of all Native American everything. Literally, you talk about literally art, culture. So he was speaking on behalf of all Native Americans at this time, and every time there was a speaking gig or some kind of grant for some work, he would get it. It was just, he was the most well-known person at the time that was in front of everybody's face. And so the public bought into it. Then it would all fall apart in 1984 when Hank Adams, a Native American activist, published an expose in Akwesasne Notes with Vine Deloria Jr. facilitating and Suzanne Harjo doing research. Now, these are people who know what they're talking about. And we talked about Akwesasne Notes earlier and how they had published Jackie in the past. Well, they were saying, you know, something's not right and we're going to tell everybody about it. So in 1984, this expose was published, and Hank Adams would unravel the timeline and reveal J. Marks and his past, how he had worked at the dance company that he owned under a completely different name, and how he told the New York Sunday News that his mother was, quote, a full-blooded Cherokee Indian. And he was quoted as saying this to the news, and he said that in 1969. So you see how the years are kind of overlapping here. So it was sometime around 1969, 1970, where he kind of started pretending to be Native American. In 1970, Columbia Records published a 9-page biography, which identified his mother as a Cherokee Native American named Marcia Highwater. And later we would come to find through this expose that her real name was actually Marcia Marks, and she had Eastern European Jewish ancestry. She was not Native American. And also, remember how he was saying he was adopted by Marcia, but now he's saying that Marcia is his birth mother and is Cherokee. So is he adopted? Is he not adopted? The story changed many times over the course of the decades, to the point where it was kind of hard to research, because some sources would literally say, if you Google this guy, some sources to this day still say that he was adopted, but there's evidence to show that he was not adopted, literally his birth certificate. So from an article, it says, when researchers could find no Highwater among the Blackfoot and Cherokee tribal records, he crossed the border into Canada and got himself adopted in a Blackfoot tourist ceremony. Yeah. And then they found his birth certificate. He was born on February 13th, 1931, to parents Marcia and Alexander in Los Angeles, California. He wasn't adopted. He wasn't born in Montana. His parents weren't Native American, not in the slightest. He was Jackie Marks. When this expose was published, the PBS deal worth hundreds of thousands of dollars was pulled immediately. And, you know, Jackie Marks deflected and denied everything. He said he was Native American and he would continue the lie until his death. But let's talk about the big USS Voyager in the room. Yes, even after this expose was published, he was hired in 1993 as a Native American consultant on Star Trek Voyager. He was responsible for verifying every script featuring Chakotay, one of the characters, for cultural accuracy. The result is a character that indigenous critics described as a pan-Indian stereotype cobbled from multiple nations' traditions, essentially a fake Native Americans' idea of what Native Americans look like. Now, I've watched a decent amount of Star Trek. You know, my corgi's name is Tilly. My other corgi's name is Obi-Wan. I like them both Star Trek and Star Wars. But I'll admit that I've never watched the episodes with this Chakotay character in it. Should I watch them? Should I completely skip them? Let me know. I'm curious to see exactly how he's portrayed in the show. Anyways, it's a real shame that Star Trek never got a better, more accurate, you know, Native American character in the series. So in my deep dive, I found that a real Native writer wrote a lot of good fanfic of the Chakotay character, and I'll link that below. It's from Archive of Our Own. And something I thought was also pretty interesting about this time period when the Voyager show came out is that Dances with Wolves came out around the same time as Voyager. And let's just say there was a lot of complicated thinking about what it meant to be Native American in the 90s. You know, things were attempting to evolve, but we weren't there yet, and we still aren't. But I just think it's interesting, you know, the movies and TV shows around this time. To go back to the fact that he was actually hired to be a consultant on Star Trek, like, how does a known fraud get hired as an authenticity consultant? Like, who was doing the due diligence? How does that even happen? Like, what? Like who? The guy was completely, this was in the 90s, and back in the mid 80s, he was outed as being a complete fraud. There were receipts. There's an accurate timeline put together in that expose. And then in the 90s, he's hired as an expert. It's like, did we even do any sort of research on this guy before he was hired? Like, I'm kind of shocked about that. And if you guys know more about how the heck that even happened, let me know. I'm so curious. Because let's just talk about there's so many legitimate Native American individuals that could have been an amazing consultant on that show. Can we just do 5 seconds of research before we hire people, okay? Anyways, so in the 90s, old Jackie never stops writing. You know, he definitely cools down on the whole Native thing, but he doesn't stop because he does consult on Star Trek. But he started to write a lot about mythology and sexuality and just kind of taking things in a totally different direction. When he died in 2001, the LA Times and Washington Post ran obituaries calling him a Native American author. Like, excuse me, people, are you even paying any attention? What? Nobody was paying any attention when the expose came out. Like, everyone's still saying, oh, he's a Native American author. No, he's not. And you will still find bios online calling him a Native American author. He's not. Like, so when I was doing this research, I was like, I must put out a video and maybe a couple people will see it. And then we'll all know this guy was not a Native American. He was proven in the 80s to not be a Native American, but we still have websites with bios out there saying that he is. And it's literally 2026. Like, what are we doing? So Hank Adams wrote letters to them, so, you know, to set the record straight on those obituaries, and they edited them. But why does Hank Adams have to be the police person telling everybody, like, okay, remember decades ago when I wrote that expose and did all that research? Well, he has to spend years literally policing the world and being like, listen, this guy is not Native American. Stop putting him on a pedestal. Stop saying that he's a Native American. He's not. It's like, how frustrating that he had to even do that. So anyways, Jackie died and people still widely believed he was the real deal. So lastly, honestly, here's some big questions. Like, when gatekeepers don't vet people, what does it cost us? Like, PBS, Newbery, Star Trek, publisher after publisher, all putting this dude on a pedestal for decades. All of the grants he got to do his bullshit work based on zero evidence and fraud. Like, you know what I mean? He had a fake identity and he got so much funding based on a complete ruse. It's just so frustrating. What did we lose because of that? How many real Native authors didn't get these deals because Highwater occupied this space for decades? Like, it's so stupid. This isn't just about one man. It's about a system that was happy to accept a safe version of indigenous culture rather than do the work and find a more qualified individual. They didn't even look into his background. Nobody bothered to look into this guy's background for years. And even when someone did and put a ton of evidence out there into the world, people were still being like, oh, well, he's a Native American author. Are we yelling into the void here? People still believe it, that he was Native American. It's actually crazy. It's just like they saw this guy and they were like, whatever, seems legit. Give him the money, give him the grant, give him the PBS show, publish his book. He seems like an expert, whatever. That's like what gets me the most about this story, is like how long it went on, sure, is insane. But that the fact that when real evidence came out and was publicized, people just like chose to not look at it, chose to ignore it. And it just goes on so long to this day. So if you feel up to it, please give that subscribe button a little hug. It needs it. We all need a hug. And that like button, you know, give it a little high five. I post a new video every Sunday where we talk about everything from crazy made up memoirs, delusional authors. There's just lots of crazy stuff being talked about on my channel and my mini little deep dives. So if you're into that kind of thing, like I am, check out the playlist that will pop up at the end of this video, and I'll see you soon. Here's our chatty segment at the end of the video. Again, if anyone is going to StokerCon in Pittsburgh, I will be there. Come say hi if you see me. I'd love to make friends in person. If you are a horror writer, or if you're a horror fan or looking to get into horror writing, this is a really, 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 really good event to go to. This will be my first time going. I do live in Pittsburgh, so I'm like super excited, but I'm also really nervous. And yes, come join me there. Also, if you're into sci-fi, I also go to a conference called Confluence. It's in Pittsburgh. It's a really, really good one. It's been going on for like literally decades and decades. And so as far as established conventions go, it's small, but it is mighty, and it's really, really, everyone's super nice, and you can make a lot of friends. So if you're into science fiction movies and books, and if you're a writer, or if you're not a writer, you're just a fan, it's a really, really fun time. So come hang out with us at Confluence. I'll put a little link in my bio below. But anyways, we're getting into summer, so there's lots of conferences and things like that happening, and maybe I'll see you at one of those. And I'm also going to Pittsburgh Book Fest. I think that's literally next weekend. Basically, if you're going anywhere in Pittsburgh to a book event, maybe you'll see me. So say hi. But anyways, I'll let you go with that, and I'll see you soon. Bye.